I'm bad at it, I'll tell you that. LD1, bad at it. LD2, bad at it. DFS, got a little bit better at it. What really helped, for when it comes to time boxing, I'm bad at time boxing. One thing that helped me a lot, I had a whole meeting with Profo about it. He's like, you're kind of like me, and he's like, you're really detail-oriented, and it's just one of your worst weaknesses right now, and not really a strength in any way. And I was like, thanks, Profo. So nice to hear. And he gave me this piece of advice, and I was doing it for DFS, and dude, it helped so much. Which was just, I have a timer on my phone, and I set it for an hour, and I have it set in intervals of 15 minutes to just do a little beep or a vibration. That's my check-in. After 15 minutes, I have to stop, sit there for a second, and say, am I making good progress? Yes? Good. Keep going. If no, why am I not making good progress? Can I seek assistance for this? 15 minutes, every 15 minutes, check in. Mentally or otherwise, you need to know every 15 minutes if you're making progress, because if you're not, let me tell you, man, if 15 minutes snowballs. You can get stuck on something for 3 hours, time just disappears. It's really, really easy. So just keeping yourself accountable for your time and knowing when you're completing tasks.
Perfect. Time boxing strategies. My time boxing became pretty strong in my second semester, and I wish it had been better in my first semester, just because burnout happens when you're just burning the midnight oil. For me personally, I work in blocks of time. So about 4 hours is as long as I can work, and I don't have to worry about managing tasks, because 15 or so minutes, if I'm on a single task and it's not working, I'll push it to somewhere else because I need to move on. After those 4 hours, I'll take a break, I'll watch a movie, I'll play a game for a couple hours, and then I'll come back as long as I have time. Time boxing becomes really important when you have classes during the week. During the weekend, you're probably going to be working on your LD stuff because that's like the biggest project you have. During the week, I wouldn't do work outside of class at all unless it was a short day. So two days a week, I would only have TGP. On those days, I would work outside of class. Otherwise, I only worked on weekends. That doesn't work for everyone, and some other professors don't like that, but it worked for me, and my work didn't kill me, and I was able to turn in something I deemed acceptable.
So time boxing is definitely a very helpful strategy to avoid burnout and making sure that you're actually, making progress. So I don't use time boxing necessarily in the grand sense of I'm going to work on this for 5 hours and then I'm going to stop and do something else. But I recommend, and I talked about this a little bit early on, is breaking up your tasks into things that are as small as possible. So that way you can have little bite-sized tasks that you can, check off of a checklist and do in shorter amounts of time rather than blocking out 3 or 4 hours. What time boxing is useful for me, is trying to just figure stuff out and, keeping yourself from hitting your head against the wall for hours and hours and hours on end. So what I like to do when I come up against something that's completely new, I have no idea how to do it, I will set a timer for 15, 30 minutes and say, okay, I will try to figure this out in this time. And if I can't figure it out, then that's when I say, okay, I'm done slamming my head against the wall on this. I'm going to send a message out and ask for help. And then in the meantime, I'm going to move on to the next task and move on to something else. So for me, time boxing is more of keeping up efficiency and being able to, keep making progress and not having to just keep yourself stuck or moving backwards, God forbid, rather than, blocking out, I'm only going to work this time and outside of that, because I like to work in little bite-sized chunks to, make some progress intermittently throughout the day.
Yeah, I didn't realize how important time boxing was until, and I think that other people will make this mistake, but until you realize that you need to start doing it, when you start wasting time on one specific thing for 2 hours, and you're like, oh gosh, that was 2 hours I could have done doing something impactful, that produced results, but instead I was spending 2 hours trying to debug this one thing that is not that important I could just change. So I would say for me, time boxing, it's all about results. I'll say in this 15 minutes, I'm going to work on this thing, and I'm not 100% sure I can do it. So if I don't figure it out in 15 minutes, I'm going to ask the class and then move on. And I'll come back to it later if I have time. But if I don't, then I'll just try and come up with a new solution to fill that problem instead of continuing to work on the same thing.
So time boxing is a skill that you're going to get better and better at the more time you spend at Guildhall and working on these projects. What time boxing is you set these time zones that you can work on like a task that you have. So for example, I'm going to place bushes around my map. Or I'm going to figure out why this AI is running into this wall at this part of my map. So you're going to say, hey, I'm going to work for 15 to 30 minutes on this. I'm going to set a timer or listen to this album, and by the time that timer ends or by the time that album's done, then you got to check in and say, okay, have I made any progress on it? And if you're still just spinning your gears and you've made no significant progress on it, at that point, you send your question in the Slack channel or ask one of the professors or look online for more help and move on to the next thing. Unless it's like a very, very critical thing like your entire level's breaking, you should really just focus on getting the majority of your tasks done instead of trying to prove to yourself that like, I will figure out this issue no matter how long it takes. Because that's just going to make the rest of your level not as good. If you have this one really good part that you figured out, then everything else is not up to snuff, it's going to be tough for you. So my best advice is set these little time zones where you can work on these tasks, these issues, these questions. If you don't get it done in that amount of time, send it to somebody else that might know the answer, and then move on to the next thing.